Hello and welcome back to another episode of Injustice For All MMA. My name is David, and this episode is for UFC Fight Night Nzechukwu versus Cutelaba. This fight originally was supposed to be for Lewis versus Spivak, but it got changed last minute. We'll just go straight into it. I'm going to try and stay as calm as possible. It seems as though every week the Apex, at first the Apex used to be fun. We could hear all the shots. We could see everything clearly. No pun intended. There was so much cool about the Apex. The commentators made it cool. And now it seems as though the commentators make the Apex unbearable. It's not fun anymore. And this fight card probably made it really lackluster because of the amounts of decisions there were. But if you look past the decisions, actually, this was actually a pretty straight card. I'm not going to lie. If we just go from top to bottom, from a decision standpoint, right? The Hiestand Garcia fight was fine. Demopoulos Oliveira was actually kind of fine. Turcios V Natividad was fine. The only shitty part was Morales versus Johns. That was terrible. Maia versus Moroz was better than the Johns fight. Same with the Johnson and Zhumagulov fight, and so on and so forth. Cortes-Acosta, Sherman. Yeah. But the only reason why I'm here is because when you watch fights in the Apex long enough, you realize that people get robbed. People get robbed in broad daylight. And if you watch this live, they got robbed in the morning time. People usually don't get robbed in the AM. They get robbed in the PM. And if I had stats on it, right? But this is pretty bad. We're going to start off with the first injustice. First and only injustice. Johnson versus Zhumagulov. I scored this fight 28-29. I had this the first two rounds for Zhumagulov, and the third round I gave to Johnson. Real quick before I even just name off the description of this fight, the UFC stats for a long time in my head has been a problem for me because a lot of the time they're just not accurate. There's been many times even in this fight card where they showed the stats during the fight, and they were just so off. Off the top of my head, I can't really... a good one would be round one, Sherman versus Cortes-Acosta. The rounds were relatively close. There was no way that Acosta was outstriking Sherman, but okay. A perfect one that really had me kind of removed for a second, was round two, Maia versus Moroz. It showed at one point 23-20 on strikes. Moroz was up, and I was thinking to myself, what the fuck? Who's pressing the buttons back there? And the only way they get away with this because Brendan every time is like the unofficial stats. I mean, even talking about this fight, Johnson versus Zhumagulov, at the end of this decision, he said, you can't even call this a robbery. No, this was a robbery. And I know they're not allowed to, say that on broadcast, but this is a nasty robbery. It's a very bad robbery. And we'll go into it. We'll go to the first round, where Zhumagulov outstruck Johnson. Clear as day. There was a part of the round where, the first half of the round, where Johnson, I don't believe, landed anything significant. Zhumagulov outstruck him well enough. Strikes to the head, strikes to the leg. And then there was a part towards the end of the round where he kind of got a takedown, but didn't. His butt didn't. Zhumagulov had Johnson down, but he didn't fully have him down. So I didn't count that as a takedown. But regardless of that point, he was outstruck. Johnson was. You go to the second round where Zhumagulov again outstruck him, and this time got a takedown. again, Johnson was hesitant to throw. He was hesitant to throw strikes. A lot of just moving and dodging. And while he did dodge a lot of Zhumagulov's strikes, he didn't outstrike him. You then go to round 3 where finally Johnson finally starts to land shots and outstrike Zhumagulov. This was a class. Now, this fight was weird because there were so many fouls, unintentional fouls by both people, by both fighters, that it made it weird to watch, but you could still score this fight correctly. And we go to the judges' scorecards where Derek clearly gave the first round to Zhumagulov and then proceeded to give the last 2 rounds to Johnson. I'm not mad with the last round because, again, that's his round, but he gives the second round to Johnson. Nowhere in that round can you argue that Johnson won that second round. You go to Douglas Crosby. He gives the first 2 rounds to Zhumagulov and then the last round to Johnson. His scorecard reflects mine. That's the correct scorecard. Not because it reflects mine, because that's just what happened. It's the right scorecard. 29-28 Zhumagulov. Saul Diamata scores it the exact same way that Derek clearly has it. I'm lost on how they scored this fight because this is the wrong decision. And it sucks. Usually I'd be a little more impassioned than this, but because I scored this fight late, the passion isn't there. We move on to another fight. Now, we're going into the honorable mentions category. This is where I just nitpick certain scorecards. This fight I wanted to put in the robbery camp. Initially, when it ended, I wanted to put in the Injustice section, but I didn't because I put a close marker on the 3rd round, which changes the way this is scored. In my head and in my heart, fuck all that. You scored this fight back. Turcios did not win this fight. I had this 29-28 for Natividad. Gave the last 2 rounds to Natividad and the first round to Turcios. You go to the first round. Both had 2 takedowns. Now, the first 2 takedowns were by Natividad in the first part of the rounds. First part of the round, 2 takedowns. But the important thing you need to understand here is that with those 2 takedowns, Turcios was active, more active than Natividad was. Active, throwing strikes from the bottom. Active. Classic guy on the bottom is beating the guy on top, right? Then later in the round, Turcios gets two takedowns of his own. Still, he's the more active person. That's obviously Turcios' round. You go to round 2. In round 2, Natividad is outstruck, kind of. He's outstruck on the feet. But it's not a lot. It's not a lot to where this round goes to Turcios. But he's outstruck on the feet. Natividad has 3 takedowns. Okay, 3 takedowns. And he drops Turcios. 3 takedowns. And he drops Turcios. This is one of those. He drops him with a knee. That's his round. There's no fighting whose round that belongs to. You then go to round 3, where this is the obvious round in question. In round 3, Natividad had 4 takedowns. 4 takedowns. Okay, 4 takedowns, and he dropped Turcios I want to say in that first 3 minutes of the round, right? Like 3 minutes are chalked off, and that's what he's done so far. Then in the late minute of the round, Turcios gets a takedown, has a submission attempt, a legit submission attempt, but then he kind of doesn't. There's a weird part where he locks it up, Natividad fights it off, and then he kind of just keeps his arm there. Kind of like Fialho versus Arosa, where Fialho has his arm there, the submission isn't in, and Arossa's just striking. Well, this one's not the same exact because Natividad's not striking him, but Turcios then gets up and then lands a lot of shots, heavy ground and pound. The question is whether that is enough to win him the round. Now, while I put a close marker there because someone could argue that what Turcios did was enough, in my view, it's not enough. What Natividad did in that first half of the round, not first half, but the majority of the round, which is 4 takedowns, and he dropped Turcios. And the strikes were fairly even on the feet up until we get to that last-minute sequence. This is Natividad's round, and in my head it's a robbery, but I can't objectively say this is a robbery because of what happened at the end there. So that's that. You go to the judges' scorecards. And Derek clearly has this 29-28 for Turcios. He gave the first and the third round for Turcios. You saw D'Amato, same exact way that Derek clearly scored it. And then Eric Manis, who has some, we'll get to him, he has some crappy scorecards later, but he gave, he had it 29-28 for Natividad. He gave the first 2 rounds to Natividad. Now, this is a bad scorecard, but he had the right fighter. He had the correct fighter. He gave the first round to Natividad. Nonsense. I thought we've gotten over the days of you take down a person a lot, but you don't do anything significant with it, you lose. Nonsense on the first round. The second round is correct. Third round is, in my opinion, it's a close round, so there's that. Next honorable mentions, I'm going to try and speed through these. You got Morales versus Johns. I had this 29-28 for Johns. I gave Johns the first 2 rounds. In that first round, it's close. Very few strikes, but Johns obviously outstruck Morales. You go to the second round, same deal. Close on strikes again, but Johns kind of barely squeaks it out. And then, and he also had a takedown in this round as well. So that secured the round for him, really. And then you go to the third round. The third round is the clearest, -2, the clearest of the rounds, where Morales outstrikes Johns, clear as day. If that's how the fight started in round 1, we probably get a different fight. But anyways, go to the judges' scorecards. Mike Bell, his scorecard reflects mine, 29-28 for Johns. Adelaide Bird, her scorecard reflects mine, 29-28 for Johns. And then Doug Crosby, he has 30-27. Honorable mention to Doug Crosby. That's a stupid scorecard. He gave the third round to Johns. Johns was outstruck heavy in that third round. Nonsense. Go to the next honorable mention. Maia versus Moroz. I had this 30-27 Moroz. I was lost when I heard anything otherwise. But whatever. First round, Maia outstrikes Moroz. Second round, Maia outstrikes Moroz. Third round, Maia outstrikes Moroz. We go to the judges' scorecards, where the only judge who gave her a 30-27 is Saul D'Amato. He had a 30-27 for Maia. Derek clearly, and Junichiro Kamijo, their scorecards were the same. Their scorecards were the same, but the third round on both of their scorecards, they gave a 10-9 to Moroz. I guess they just valued what Moroz did in the third round, which was some flurries, but she was still outstruck. There's no way she won that round. So honorable mention to those two. Next honorable mention. Okay. Let's see if I'm flying through these right. Next honorable mention. Yeah, Fialho versus Salikhov. This one ended in a TKO for Salikhov. I gave the first round to Fialho, and then the second round I gave to Salikhov. I gave a 10-9 to Salikhov in the second round. The reason why I'm highlighting this is because you go to the judges' scorecards. Mike Bell, Adelaide Bird, and Chris Lee, all their scorecards are the same. They gave a 10-9 for Fialho in the first round. And then you go to the second round where they all gave a 10-8 to Muslim Salikhov. You read the descriptions here, and in the first round, Fialho outstruck Salikhov on the feet. Salikhov had a takedown with a little bit of ground and pound, but it wasn't enough because he was clearly outstruck on the feet. Then in the second round, Salikhov outstruck Fialho by a lot, but it wasn't. He rocked him. He rocked him the first time, but it wasn't enough to where we've seen people get dropped and not get 10-8s. So you get wobbled, and you just, all three judges are like, yeah, here's a 10-8. I'm lost, really. I'm kind of confused on that, but there's whatever. I don't know if I can criticize it because all three judges gave it to him, so they must have saw something I didn't. Next honorable mention, a fight that, if you look at the stats, maybe, and again, I'm not trusting the stats, but if you watch it, I'm talking about Sherman versus Cortes-Acosta. Second round, there's a possible 10-8, but there isn't in my view, because I think there's enough where Sherman kind of wards off the 10-8. Anyways, I had it 29-28 for Cortes-Acosta. I gave him the last two rounds. First round, I gave to Sherman. You go to, where are we at here? Oh, yeah, here we go. First round. It's close on strikes. It was actually close for that first, 4 minutes. They were both kind of trading. And then that's when Sherman gets the takedown, 100% his round. Go to the second round. Cortes-Acosta just outstrikes him heavily. In my opinion, not enough for a 10-8. Outstrikes him heavily. Then you go to the third round. Cortes-Acosta outstrikes him enough to win that round. 29-28 for Cortes-Acosta. You go to the judges' scorecards. Saul D'Amato had it the way I had it, 29-28. Junior Chiricomigio had it the same way, 29-28. And then Anthony Manis gave the first round to Cortes-Acosta. Nonsense. Honorable mention to him. And that really ends everything. We were supposed to get Lewis versus Spivak. We don't. Hopefully that gets rebooked. Just I don't know. This card, it wasn't too bad, actually. I was invested. A lot of cool stuff happened. Not a lot of finishes, but a lot of cool stuff happened. The only bad part about this card is Zhumagulov getting robbed. I mean, whether or not you're a fan of him is regardless, but he won this fight clear. It's weird. This fight reminds me of Roberts versus that guy who got robbed by Roberts. It's nuts. It's insane. But that's all I got. Thank you for listening, and God bless.